A quick reminder of how we rate cards here on the Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or cards that go in one particular deck get a Bless token, while cards that we think are bad for the game or destined to end up on the list of taboos get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support over the years. It is greatly appreciated. Welcome back, everyone. We are making our way through the player cards in the Feast for Hemlock Vale Investigator expansion. We are once again joined by special guest Veronica. We are going to start off with Chemistry Set. It is a 2-cost asset with an Intellect skill icon, item, tool, and science trait. As an action, you can exhaust Chemistry Set, investigate. If you fail by exactly 2, discard Chemistry Set. Succeed by exactly 0, gain 2 resources. Succeed by exactly 2, draw 1 card. Succeed by exactly 4, discover 1 additional clue at your location, and it takes up an accessory slot. Thoughts about the Chemistry Set?
This is such an unusual card. I believe we saw this one very early in previous season, and having now played with it, so I mentioned last time that I did that I am currently doing a Kate playthrough through the Return to Intimate Conspiracies cycle, which I should point out because the comments on YouTube hopefully reminded that I didn't actually say this. That is a fan-made product. The Return to part of the campaign is actually fan-made. That's not an FFG announcement you completely missed somehow. Apologies for not making that clear last time. But yeah, I've been playing this card with Kate, and so we're not talking about Steady-Handed in this video, which is a card that synergizes with this card. So evaluating this on its base, let's just assume that we're hitting an even value about half of the time. I think if you investigate with this 6 or 7 times, it's probably going to get you some value, but it critically doesn't help you pass the investigate in any way. And it also is like the value it gets is, well, it refunds you 2 resources, or it draws you a card, but you also spend an action to play this, and it's a card itself. So it's one of these cards where, like, it's not very good unless you can very reliably succeed by exactly 4, but I think that is something that most decks can't do. And if you can do that, I think there are probably other things you can do that are equally or more powerful, which brings me around to, like, this card is fine. I think this is a thing that we'll be talking about a lot with the cards in this expansion, is that a lot of secret cards in this box are just fine. They're not spectacular, they're not as powerful as a lot of the other secret cards we've seen in the past, but it's not bad, right? You put this in a deck, and assuming you don't immediately fail a test by 2, which is the lockpick level 0 problem that this card does have a little bit, you're probably going to get some resources out of it. You're probably going to draw a card. If you're Kate, obviously this is a tool and science. You can put one of your clues on this to get a +2, which is the reason you're probably playing this. I wouldn't go out of my way to play this in anyone else, but I also don't begrudge anybody for putting this in their deck just because it's fun, and I think cards are allowed to be fun.
They're allowed to be fun. Are you sure? I thought they were supposed to be, used as brutal sledgehammers to decimate, Maxine's creations.
No, that's the Guardian cards. We talked about those last time.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, so let's see. Chemistry shot. Yeah. I look at it, and you make an important point that I want to pick up on, is that it doesn't actually help you do any investigating at all. It just gives you some consequences, positive or negative, for passing or failing the investigate. So I want to compare this to Fingerprint Kit out of the gate. So Fingerprint Kit, 3 charges. This has infinite. They both exhaust. Fingerprint Kit gives you +1 to the investigate, and it gives you an additional clue no matter what. So, and it's more expensive. So I want to look at it that way. I think the most important difference there is that Fingerprint Kit takes up the so important in Seeker hand slot, where Chemistry Set takes up the less important, accessory slot.
Yeah, out of all the factions in the game, I think Seeker might have the least occupied accessory slot, at least level 0. That's one of the things that I also have in this card. Is like, if you put this in at level 0 and then you upgrade into a stronger accessory down the line, again, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I'll go with you on this. It's just fine. I think I wouldn't ever play this unless I already had like something else in the deck that would synergize. Like I don't think I'd throw this in on in just random Daisy or something. I don't see any reason for that, because at that point these are card slots that could be used on things like, say, Hawkeye Folding Camera, for example, something that's a bit more, straightforward. Or yeah, but if you already are running ways to like nudge the result, then I think I could see myself running this. Yeah, and also to note, I mean, for our listeners, like you don't have to get this thing to trigger every time for it to be worth using. You know, if you make lots of investigates like every turn, then you get a few things, and hopefully it pays for itself, and then you're feeling okay. But
Yeah. It does
yeah,
exhaust though, which is kind of tricky. Like you're not
true,
going to get more than one try at it every turn unless you have
true.
some way to ready this. I'm very curious how
That's
this
true.
feels in solo, and I suspect that you're going to have some insight for me there.
Yeah, I put this in a Kate deck. I used In the Thick of It to get 2 copies of Steady Handed and 1 copy of Fine Tuning in the deck, so I could use it more than once per turn and play around with the result. In the game I played with it, I had it online by turn 5. So I had this Steady Handed and Fine Tuning all on the table on turn 5. And then over the next 6 turns, I triggered it 4 times. Once for 2 resources, once for a card, and then twice for the additional clue. So it did its job, which was a pleasant surprise. It just sort of felt to me like Seekers have so many ways of drawing cards that, you know, I was drawing tons of cards with empirical hypothesis, so the card draw was kind of like, okay, well, I got a card out of it, but I'm basically getting a card every turn with empirical hypothesis. And then I got some resources from it, but I'm like, well, I played Crack the Case and I got a whole bunch of resources off that. And so it was, yeah, I agree with both of you. Like, it's fine, it does stuff, and I was happy, especially when I got the extra clues. But then again, you know, Seekers do have other ways of getting extra clues, and so
Yeah, so you start. Yeah, so one thing that you're doing there by noting things like Crack the Case and noting things like empirical hypothesis. That's kind of the thing when I look at cards like this and at most of the Seeker cards in this collection here. It's like they're not the crazy overpowered ones. So it's like it's kind of a breath of fresh air. You do have to make that choice to like not play crazy overpowered Seeker cards and instead play cards like this. And but I like that FFG is finally letting us, if that makes sense.
but I would say it was entertaining to try to
Yeah.
succeed by exactly something. And I think it was Valentine 1331 who figured out, you know, if you've got this and Steady Handed and you're 5 up above the shroud before you
Oh
pull from
yeah.
the bag, you've got about a 60% chance of getting the extra clue. So it's going to work out for you more than half the time. In the one case I got the extra clue from this as well as a deduction and was able to clear a location with 3 clues on it. So, you know, I was happy with how it performed, but I don't know if I would just drop it in a deck either.
It's kind of funny. I just now realized that maybe part of the reason why I'm a little lower on this card is because the deck that I've been playing in it has been alongside a Sister Mary and a Kohaku who have been stuffing the bag full of Bless and Curse tokens, and we were playing the Lair of Dagon last night, and so my skill tests went between like +5, or I saw results between +5 and like -7 on the regular. And when you have bags like that, yeah, this card isn't gonna be as great. So I think,
But it's gonna be fun.
it's kind of it's definitely fun. Now, don't get me wrong, but maybe this is an interesting card to put in a Blessing Curse expansion. Let me put it that way. I also think,
Yeah.
and I don't want to talk too much about Steady Hand because that is its own card. But one of the things that is kind of interesting to me is that we have this card that cares a lot about the exact amount you succeed by. We have another one that we're talking about next, and we have a card that allows you to manipulate how much you succeed by. And that's it. I was kind of expecting to get a couple more payoffs. We have the katana. We talked about the katana as well, but that's already in a different faction. And I had honestly expected that Seeker would get like 1 or 2 more cards so that it was really an archetype. Because right now it feels like you can do this and you can put these cards in your deck to make this like succeed by exactly value, which I think is cool as a different way of doing skill test manipulation compared to rogues who just want to smash every test. Seekers have a very specific number they want to hit. That's cool, but it's just like it feels like it was either something that they didn't have a lot more ideas of what to do with, or maybe we're getting another couple of effects in a different box. But it just feels like it's something you can put in your deck, but it doesn't really feel worth putting all those deck slots in just to like get an extra clue with chemistry set. So yeah, I'm a little torn on this card.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lot of types and concepts that show up in Arkham Horror. Like when they first show up, they're always like underdeveloped and the payoffs aren't really worth it. Think like diving for symbols, or bless and curse even. Yeah, they never seem to, at least when they're first introduced, they never seem to like be worth the effort.
Oh, I have one last thing that you just reminded me with, because I was thinking of other archetypes, and I was thinking of the Dark Horse archetype, which made me think of Survivor cards, which is of course the best faction, and specifically the card Will to Survive, because Will to Survive lets you skip drawing Chaos tokens from the Chaos bag, and so I don't know if Will to Survive 0 is a good card, because don't forget that card does exist. It's in the Stella pack.
Yeah.
I see you like struggling to remember what it does. It lets you skip opponent tokens on a single test, which it costs I think 4 resources to play, which basically turns it into a intel report if you have this out and you can succeed by exactly 4, which is like not the worst place in the world to be. And I don't off the top of my head who can take this, and that's like Daryl. I think we're Daryling at that point. But it's just like, yeah, I think there are shenanigans you can do with this card that's going to be fun and interesting. It's maybe again not the most powerful, but yeah, there are Will to Survive. I think Will to Survive and the fine tuning, so you can ready this. That would potentially be kind of an interesting deck.
How would we rate this one?
Matt, you want to go first on this one?
Well, all told, we're still a card rating service, to rate cards. And we talk about how fun things are, right? Like we in this channel, and I love how we're coming into the Seekers, like we're so bright-eyed and we're so curious and we're so ready for this new era of like fun, nuanced Seeker cards. But you know what? At some point, we have to come crashing back down to reality, the reality of the entire card pool, and just evaluate things on their just pure like efficiency, which gives this an elder thing for me, because it's just extra effort, and there are other card slots. Like if you want pure power, there are other things that you could put in instead that are like, I'd put Working a Hunch in, or Magnifying Glass, or Hawkeye Folding Camera, or
I'm definitely not cutting my magnifying glass for this, but I am going to be a little bit more charitable to this card. I'm just going to give it a 0.
That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear.
I just think, I mean, maybe giving this a 0 is a little. The problem is, I know that one of the other cards we're going to talk about in a bit, but I can't. I cannot, in good honesty, give this an elder thing. I think that is a disservice to this card. This card is fine if you put it in your deck, even if you're not doing anything if you put this in a Kate deck, even if you're not doing any shenanigans, the fact that this is a tool in science, it's good enough. It'll make you happy. Just don't fail by exactly 2 the first time you use it. You'll be happy. I'll give it a 0.
I'm going to give it a bless token. I think I think there's enough there that you can probably build around this quite happily. I mean, I did. I built a deck that used steady-handed and fine-tuning and was able to trigger it 4 times in 6 turns. So that to me is a pretty good payoff. But yeah, I agree, Mattastrophic. If you're just looking for pure power, I don't know if the payoff is good enough for all that extra work and setup. But it does get you stuff, and if you can trigger it succeed by 4, you can often get that extra clue, which is always helpful. So, and it is kind of fun playing that little mini game where you're like, oh, can I succeed by 4? What do I need to do in order to do that? And you're not really doing just sort of I'm gonna just brute force everything and succeed by 1,000 every time I investigate a location and grab 3 or 4 clues at a shot. This one's a little more nuanced.
Yeah, there we go. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear this optimism. Let's keep this optimism train going, guys.
I will give it a blessed token.
I also love that in the Guardian we were all like the same token value basically every single time, and the first Seeker card we give 3 different results. Let's keep this going. What's our next card?
The next card is Dr. Charles West III. He's a 3-cost asset with an intellect and combat skill icon, ally, and science trait. You have 1 additional hand slot, which can only be used to hold a tool asset. As a reaction, after you successfully investigate by exactly 1 or 3, exhaust Dr. Charles West III. Deal 1 damage to an enemy at your location. He has 1 health, 2 sanity, and takes up an ally slot. Thoughts on the good doctor?
So the first time I read this card, I was pretty low on it, but the more I've thought about it, and this is more speculation than actually playing, because I haven't actually put him in a deck yet, but I think that this card has a room in the card pool. The problem is that where Seekers don't have a lot of great accessories at level 0, they have some of the best allies in the game at level 0, because this is going to get compared to Dr. Milan, to Dr. Kirby, or Professor Kirby, I don't remember exactly which title he has, and also Lab Assistant, even in the specific context of a Kate deck, where you might be looking for that science trait. I believe Lab Assistance is a science card, and so you're even then competing with this. That being said, having an additional hand slot to hold a tool asset basically means that this card might as well read you get +1 intellect during investigations, because you can just use that hand slot to hold a magnifying glass.
Oh, okay.
And if we are brave enough to just, because I was looking at this card and going, okay, it's not 100% there in my head, but which of these abilities, like, how does this interact? What does this do? And the thing that I just kind of came to is like, no, actually, I'm kind of okay with the way that this is worded, because getting extra hand slots in Seeker is actually really valuable. Seeker, I think, has maybe the most hand pressure in the entire game. I mean, Guardians also, but Guardians because they want to have big gun and small gun. Seekers because they have a bunch of different things that they might be doing with their hands. Even if you have your 2 tools for investigating, you might also want a tome so you can do some support stuff.
True.
And
Seekers can get pretty handsy.
yeah. And I think I haven't talked about the reaction yet, and I think it is the most interesting comparison, because of course we are going to be talking about Alice Luxley next. I don't think we can get through talking about this card without talking about
You said it. You said
it. Listen, Alice Luxley is a underrated card. That's the first thing I'm going to say. The second thing is, this is Alice Luxley in the faction, I think, that wants to play Alice Luxley more than Guardian actually does, because I don't think Guardian, talking about level 0, not the beta, like level 2 version or whatever they ended up making, but I think most Guardians don't necessarily love Alex Luxley level 0 because they don't want to do basic investigates. Seekers are fine taking basics investigates. Also, this might just be the fact that the campaign that I've placed most in the last year or so has been Scarlet Keys. Alice Luxley in Scarlet Keys is overpowered. I played a Rex deck with Alice in that deck. That deck can clear 2 concealed minicards and get a clue. And it's just like completely messed up. And I think if you don't have access to Alice for whatever reason, I would be happy to play Dr. Charles West and just get a basically free action every now and then to ping one of the mini cards. That is still really valuable. So yeah, I think this. I mean, when we start talking about where does this card slot, the problem is that I think my answer starts to become, well, a Scarlet Keys playthrough more than a specific deck archetype. But yeah, I think the power level is good enough that this is worth considering. And the other thing, just always looking at when I'm looking at Seeker level 0, is the Miskatonic Archaeology funding, which is the special charisma. This isn't Miskatonic, which is a shame. But if all your other allies are Miskatonic, then this is your one regular ally slot. And also calling in favors. You can call in favors get out a lab assistant, play this thing again. Lots of fun stuff you can do with that. Sorry, I should let one of you talk. Go ahead.
No, this is fine. Yeah, you even brought up my my observation about Miskatonic Archaeology funding. Once again, we have something that's like we're breaking away from the mold, of previous Seeker cards that are like fully developed and all that. So we're taking a new direction. It's part of why I'm so happy today to be talking about these Seeker cards. So one thing that's got me really thinking here. All right, first of all, it gives you a hand slot, and which is nice about that, you don't exactly need to get Dr. Charles West III in your opening hand. It can be very tempting to, if you're running the basic like Dr. Milan, or Jeremiah Kirby, you feel bad when you don't get them very early. So Charles West, because his first ability, it gives you a 3rd hand slot, you don't really need that until you filled up your other 2 hand slots. So it's not as bad. He's not as bad when you like draw him in middle of the game, which is actually kind of great. The other thing I want to note that's kind of neat is, so we've got the chemistry set, right? So note how the chemistry set triggers off of succeeding by even numbers. All right, this guy triggers off of succeeding by odd numbers. So what's a certain thing that you don't provoke attackers of opportunity from that turn your even numbers into odd numbers? What am I thinking?
I have no idea.
Whippoorwill.
It's been a minute since I've been in Dunwich, okay?
Come on, whippoorwills. Maybe it just tells you. Maybe that tells you something about how I've been, going across Arkham time and space, and I've seen like many different fan mades and lots of different effects and stuff like that. So yeah, I think what's going on is I don't know what I'm thinking here. What was my point? I had a point.
You can kill whippoorwills with this guy.
Yes, that was my point. It's not a very good one. It's really
It's not a
not
bad
very
one.
good.
I mean, killing one health enemies, especially one health enemies, has always been a very tempting line of text on any card. And I think that this,
Yeah.
it's also one of those things where like, is this good in decks that don't want to fight enemies but might be a kind of a supporty style seeker where you're standing next to the guardian while they are going to fight on their turn, and you just go, well, they succeeded by exactly one, so I'll just put a point of damage on that. That might save you a vicious blow like once in a while. And
Yeah.
my experience with that effect has been that it's been underwhelming when it's the guardian trying to do it, right? If you have Alex Luxley and you're like, well, I can do 1 point of damage and then I still have to fight this enemy, and it doesn't, like, it feels like jumping through a lot of hoops. But I don't know, maybe if you're not the one who's doing the fighting, getting to free up a couple actions on the Guardian side of things, especially if what you're playing is actually not the classic Seeker Guardian split, but more of a flex split, where the person who's doing a bit more of the fighting might also be evading. And we'll be talking about Microscope in a bit, which also encourages evasion. So I think that there's something there, but I'm not necessarily convinced that this is the way to go there. So yeah, I'm a little. Yeah, I'm definitely going like, if you never put Charles West in a deck, you're not missing out on anything. But if you want to try to play with this scientist, then I think you'll still have a good time.
Now, I have not
different.
played this guy in solo, but I suspect that in the solo environment, he is not going to be your first ally choice. He's probably not even your second ally choice. I do appreciate having that extra hand slot for a tool. Extra hand slots are notoriously hard to come by, so getting one of those is nice. And I mean, you can put a magnifying glass in there, so you are getting the +1 intellect that Mile and Christopher would give you. The reaction sort of implies that, at least in solo, that you've either evaded something at your location first, or you're taking attacks of opportunity, which in solo is not a position I want to be in. It's interesting, as just before Matt, you started talking about whippoorwills, I just had the same thought. I'm like, oh, he can kill a whippoorwill. So unless you've got a lot of aloof enemies on the table, yeah, he would be okay. But I think in solo, generally, dealing 1 damage to an enemy at your location isn't going to be quite enough, because you're going to have to evade it first, and then you're going to have to investigate, and then you're going to have to, tweak the numbers to deal that 1 damage. And when I'm playing Seekers in solo, I tend to just nuke things using I've got a plan or occult invocation and stuff like that, and dealing 1 damage just doesn't matter. So I'm not crazy about this guy in solo, and but I can definitely appreciate how he does give you that extra hand slot and stuff like that. How would we rate this guy?
Scarlet Key. Okay, it was a joke. If you want to do it, then go ahead and put a Scarlet Key on the screen right now. If not, my actual answer is Blessed Token. I think that he is, and in this case, it's the Blessed Token of, it needs to be the right campaign or the right group setup. Where if you are doing, the thing is that he fits in he knows his purpose. He fits in a certain context. He exists within. Some decks are going to just get more value out of this ability than others, and I think that accepting that and trying to build towards that, instead of going, yeah, but if I just take Milan, I'll be more efficient. It's like, are you though? Like, 1 damage saving an action sometimes might just be a big deal. I don't know. I look forward to seeing this guy. Also, actually, sorry, one last thought just jumped up. How does Charlie feel about this card? Because he doesn't give a static boost, which is kind of worse, but Charlie can get tool assets from a wide range of classes, so might be something there. And giving both an intellect and a combat icon might be kind of fun for a Charlie King deck that like is fighting and investigating, so you can use him on alternating turns to do different things.
That's true. So he has a passive, which is nice. Which is nice for Charlie. Yeah, he's got 2 different icons, also nice for Charlie. So what you're saying is that Charlie can just ignore that second ability entirely and just leverage the icons and the ability. Yeah, it seems fine. Yeah.
You don't have to ignore it entirely if you are in a situation where it's
Yeah.
relevant. But if what you're bringing, in Charlie, I think a lot of the time you're bringing your allies for passive plus stat boost. In which case, paying 3 for an extra hand slot and then an intellect and a combat icon, actually, like those are pretty reasonable
Okay.
cost to effect ratio.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It definitely goes in my 45 ally Charlie deck, that's for sure. So I'm gonna be the naysayer. I'm gonna bring everything back down to earth. Even though we've been having so much fun, it's gonna be a big, shiny, bald Elder Thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I'm going to join you at Elder Thing. At least in solo, I think his value may go up to a 0 or even a bless in, if you're playing Charlie Kane or, a specific deck in a specific campaign, this guy's value probably goes up. But when I look at him as a solo player, I am not excited. I need my allies to do slightly more, and the fact that I'd be just getting basically a hand slot and then having to do extra work to get the damage doesn't really appeal to me all that much. But I can see him having a place in decks, just not my solo decks. So the next card we're going to talk about is Microscope. It is a 2-cost asset with an intellect skill icon, item, tool, and science trait. As a response, after an enemy at your location is successfully evaded or defeated, exhaust Microscope. Place 1 resource on Microscope as evidence. For 2 actions you can investigate, you get +1 intellect for this investigation for each evidence on Microscope to a maximum of +3 intellect. If you succeed, you may spend up to 2 evidence to discover that many additional clues at your location, and it takes up a hand slot. Thoughts about the Microscope?
I actually would love to hear from you first, because I am very curious what you think of this card in a solo context.
So I did play this. I did give it a try, and I was prepared to hate it because it's one of those cards that requires work. You need some enemies to show up before it actually does anything. So you can stack some evidence on it. And I was playing it in a Wilson deck, and Wilson is good because he gets an extra +1 out of this, so it can help him investigate.
Oh, right.
I was playing it in Dunwich, so there were lots of enemies, so I stacking evidence on it wasn't a problem. The problem was the 2 actions to investigate. It took me a long time to try to wrap my head around the whole 2 actions to investigate with this thing. And unless you're getting the extra clue, it doesn't feel great.
Okay.
Or an extra 2 clues. Like, unless you're able to spend the evidence to, say, get 2 clues for 2 actions or 3 clues for 2 actions, it didn't feel great. Now, I think I was playing that deck really badly, so this may change should I give it a try again, but I could see a situation where you play Microscope to deal with multiple clue locations and something like Old Keyring to deal with the 1 clue locations, and then swap between them as necessary. The problem I see with that, at least in Wilson, is that I think Wilson wants the sledgehammer, so then you've got to tinker the sledgehammer, get Microscope and Old Keyring, and then you need the tool belt in order to swap between them, or an extra tinker, and there's a lot of moving parts to get all that going. So it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it didn't feel great either. It's, I think, one of those cards I'll have to play with again and see if I can get it to work a little more efficiently. But that double action investigate seemed slow. I'm
not at all surprised to hear that. I think that this is a card that I would hesitate to put in my deck in 2-player and would only seriously consider in 3 or 4-player, because if I'm not almost always getting 3 clues with that double action, then I don't really know why I'm playing this. This is one of the first cards of the expansion that I played, because this was in the announcement article, and I did a live stream way back when, before we'd even seen like the backs of Kate and Hank, and I just loaded this in, and it worked. It was a 2-player deck, and it worked on like a location, because I think I went into the Pit of Despair, and there was is it the Underground River that has like 4 clues in 2-player. So it was pretty good there, but it's I think the main power, in addition to getting one more clue for the 2 actions. So like if you take 2 clues to just investigate, you might get 2 clues. If you take 2 actions on this, you get 3 clues. The other reason I think this card might be interesting is because it compresses a lot of investigates, which is that if you need to get 3 clues through 3 basic investigates, you have to boost your intellect 3 times, which for a lot of seekers isn't a big deal, because if you have magnifying glass and base intellect of 5, then you don't care. But if your intellect is naturally a little lower, like say Kate, who has a base int of 4, this is already starting to look a little bit more appealing, just because it means you can just smash a test pretty easily. And also, you only spend the evidence if you succeed. And I don't consider myself to be a hard expert player. I've tried to play a little bit of hard recently, then studies got in the way and I stopped playing that campaign. But such is life. But I could imagine being giving this card another look when going into hard, because it means you have to do 1 test and you can get 3 clues. And if you fail, you haven't lost much other than your 2 actions, which admittedly, big thing to lose. But if the bag is unkind to you, at least you're not out your deduction level 2 or whatever. And I also have a trick question for Matt. Which rogues can take this? A pop quiz coming up.
Jenny.
Correct.
Finn.
Yeah. Correct. And possibly interesting because this says of 8.
Trish.
Correct. Who might play this? It's not entirely her playstyle, but it isn't. Like, again, if she's evading enemies, doesn't seem terrible.
Monterey Jack.
Correct. Limited slots, but correct.
Kamani, because it's a tool.
Got it. Kamani's 0 to 4 tool has confused a lot of people, myself included, because they are a perfectly sensible rogue with just 0 to 5 rogue, which admittedly is also kind of what they had, because a lot of the tools just didn't really do all that much. This is one of the cards that make me go, oh, okay, maybe there is a Kamani tool playstyle, because one of the cards that I've always advocated for in Kamani is Fingerprint Kit level 4, because Kamani has 2 intellect. So there are 2 ways around that. The first is you do the rogue thing, you replace it with your agility, and you do thieves kit stuff and thing like that. But the other way is you do 1 big test per turn. You have some way of getting a big boost on that, whether that is not higher education streetwise, or well connected, or maybe is it calculated risk, the skill card that is like
the
equal to the action.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, fitting in that like lineup where instead of getting a bunch of rogue tricked or whatever, you just have this thing. You're evading enemies all the time because you're Kamani, and then once you're in a location where it's like, okay, this is a bunch of clues, let me just pick up 2 of them. And notably, the reason why I ask about rogues using this, I think the double action is a lot less painful if you have 4 actions in a turn. Right, if you're playing with Leo DeLuca, or you have quick thinking or whatever else, suddenly there's a lot more you can do with this card. And I can see a flex Finn or a flex Kaimani definitely picking this card up as like, hey, I'm not the main clue getter here, but occasionally I will just walk into a location, empty the location, and then the main clue getter doesn't even have to bother coming over.
Yeah, it actually tickles a lot of those my history with like 3-3-3-3 investigators, to be honest. Because one point you made there, Veronica, that's like really, really important and really like resonates with me, is the feeling that, okay, I'm playing a 3-3-3 investigator, I'm playing a generalist, and things struggle when I need to like do a lot of the same thing over and over, such as investigate a 4-shroud location over and over, as a generalist. There's something like this, I'm like personally what I've done in the past is I've played things like Intel Report to like deal with locations like that. So, I spend a bunch of resources and, to compress the actions down so I don't have to like burn my hand on the skill icons. But this is the same sort of thing where, you let the evidence pile up, which is nice because the evidence piles up passively. And and then you can just like burn it and the extra action to just take, as you said, as you were saying, 1 test at +3, by the way. Very important and you only have to succeed. You don't have to succeed by 2 or anything like that to just, scoop up the clues you need. Yeah, I've also had some instances, where it's like I run into like a 6-shroud location and I go, and then everything, and then all of my, the weight of the game is on whether I can like hit the 6-shroud. I'm thinking like, although not so keen for this one, I'm thinking like Curtain Call, for example, where like you have to make a 6 difficulty, test, a 6 difficulty investigate in order to clear out the, the man in the pallid mask, stuff like that. So when like the whole game comes down to like making one big test, it's nice to have +3, and I'm willing to spend an extra action to make it happen. That's for sure. So I kind of like this thing actually. It kind of fits my playstyle of like being a generalist and then like being willing to spend a little extra on that security, and action compression. So I kind of like this card.
How would we rate this one?
I'm gonna be bold. I'm gonna say it +1.
Ooh, okay.
I like this design. And maybe this is me being a little
Okay.
little bit more on the like fun side of things than necessarily the power level, but I think it's one of these. It's not a build around card. It's not a bless token to me, but it's definitely one of those where if you put it in the right deck, which I talked about, this kind of generalist or in 3-player, this like flexible evasion and then occasionally pick up a bunch of clues. I think this will way overperform. I think this is a cheaper fingerprint kit in that sense, and I think fingerprint kit is an underrated card, and I think this will perform similarly.
Yeah, I'll even, tell you what, I'm gonna join the fun. I'm gonna join you up at +1 because this tickles the same things that make me love playing. Like, I've historically played Fingerprint Kit and like Jenny and Lola like a lot because of that same vibe where you spend a bunch of resources to compress your actions, and overcome your like 3 in intellect, and this does the same thing. So you know what? I'm joining you. I'm joining you at +1 on +1 hill. And here comes
think if I was to rate this solely on my experience in the solo environment, it might end up with an Elder thing. But I can appreciate that this is much better in multiplayer because you don't have to do all the evading or killing yourself. You can just sit there and get evidence sort of passively. And I do appreciate that action compression where you can, it's not really action compression, but test compression where you're doing one test at +3 or 4 rather than multiple tests, so you don't have to boost as much. That I quite like. So I think I'm going to go 0 on this one. I'm not convinced it's going to make the cut in solo simply because of that double action and the need to really want to get the extra clue. But I can see it as a tool to get that extra clue, but then you sort of need another card to get the like those one shroud location, or not one shroud, but the one clue location. So you need another thing to do that. And then of course, if you're playing solo, you need some sort of enemy management. So having not built the deck, I'm not quite sure how that all fits together. Whether you could say run Microscope and then something else in your other hand slot to help you get clues, and then rely on either just native evasion or events or something like that to help you deal with the enemies. That might work. But so I'm going to go 0 with the possibility that it either gets much better in multiplayer, in which case it could be a +1, or much worse in solo, in which case it could be an Elder thing. So I'll split the difference and end up in the middle, which is a lot higher than I thought this thing was going to be when I first looked at it. I think this was one of the first cards that they spoiled when the set was revealed, and I was like, oh, 2 actions. Oh,
I like it though. 2 actions makes it feel right. You know what I mean? If it was 1 action, I feel like, good lord, frosted secret bullshit.
Well, if you like the level 0 version of Microscope, there is a level 4 version of Microscope. It has it's a 2-cost asset with 2 intellect skill icons, item, tool, and science trait. As a response, after an enemy at your location is successfully evaded or defeated, place 1 resource on Microscope as evidence. It has the same double action, except you can get +2 intellect for this investigation for each evidence on the Microscope to a maximum of +6. And if you succeed, you can spend up to 3 evidence to discover that many additional clues at your location, and it still takes up a hand slot. I don't think you would ever really need to upgrade to this in solo, but I could definitely see if you're playing multiplayer and you want to have the potential to grab 4 clues at a time.
Yeah, I like the Kamani thing that Veronica you were talking about earlier for like the level 4 version. It feels very Kamani where it's like I'm getting +6,
Yeah.
where like you actually need it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't really imagine, at least on standard, any seeker who,
Yeah.
even Kate, who needs a +6, but I can definitely see Kamani going, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I just realized that indeed we went through the entire discussion of Microsoft Zero without actually mentioning that, yeah, you don't have to be the one to defeat or evade the enemy, which thank you for bringing that up, Manfromleng, at the end there, because that is actually kind of important. This is the most 4-player only card I think they've printed in quite a while, because the amount of clues it gets you on the double action is 4 at optimal use, which is a 1 per investigator location in 4-player, and it's also like if there are multiple enemies being drawn every round, then this will accrue evidence faster
Oh,
than
that's
the
true.
level 0. If you're using the level 0, then even if like if there's only one enemy, then typically the level 0 microscope might only get a single evidence per turn anyway, so it doesn't really matter to upgrade. And it's the one thing that is kind of funny is, and that I'm kind of glad about. We didn't mention Daryl when discussing the level 0, but this is of course a card that uses evidence, so it is also a way to feel his ability. And I am kind of glad that this doesn't work for him because it doesn't have the non-swarm clause on it. So if you can destroy a whole bunch of swarm enemies and then pile up a
Yeah.
billion evidence, but fortunately they already gave us a card like that in, I think it was last year, where they, or was it actually in this set? I don't remember the dissection tools. No, that was last
Oh, that
cycle.
was
Yeah,
yeah.
Scarlet Keys. But that is also a card that just piles up evidence when you defeat enemies. So I guess
Yeah.
he doesn't need this anyway. The point that I'm trying to make with this is if you like Microscope and you're in a 4-player, then I think you can upgrade it. But wow, do the numbers that get changed not change in a fantastic way for this to be 4 XP? I think you could make this 2 XP and it still like wouldn't necessarily be a standout card in 2-player.
Mhm.
I get that for 4-player. I think the card has to be kind of balanced the way it is because otherwise this would just be the best fingerprint kit they've ever printed. But it's
Uh,
so it's
the
so
joys
hard.
of balancing cards for multiple formats.
Mm-hmm.
No, I like the upgrade for like yeah, for the fact that you can, I don't know, if you're discovering 4 clues in 2 actions, that's pretty good. With all that boost. Yeah, I kind of like that. The I mean, I can't say much more because Lola can't take it, so
Right.
sorry. That's where my expertise ends.
Ratings?
0 and I don't feel good about it, or Elder Thing and I feel bad about it. So it's like, yeah, I think I'm
That's
gonna
fair.
end up on a 0. I think I'm gonna end up on a 0 just because like I can very easily imagine that you don't have to do a lot of work in 4-player for this card to just be action, action, discover 4 clues without
Yeah.
any other support cards or any difficulty. And I don't think it's fair to put a card like that in under 0. But I also imagine that if you put this in your deck in 2-player, expecting it to perform at that level, you are going to be sorely disappointed. So it's a 0 with a warning label 4-player only on there. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's like, yeah, this is just a different card at 4-player than any other player card. If you play this in solo, this card is 2 intellect icons. It is a
Yeah.
perception that does not draw you a card.
I'll stick with 0. Yeah, even though you got me focused on like the Kamani Monterey Jack type thing, where I mean Finn can't do it, but still you got me thinking about, you have this thing, it builds up evidence, then you just go boom and you get like 3 or 4 clues. Yeah, that seems good.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me to rate because
Yeah.
I don't play multiplayer enough, and so this will never make the cut in my solo decks. So, I mean, from that standpoint, it's an auto fail, but this is not an auto fail card. So, I will stick with 0, maybe
All right.
even +1, or yeah, probably +1 if you're playing in 4-player and you're just, I mean, it's grabbing you 4 clues, and if you've got, say, somebody else killing the enemies or evading enemies for you, and you don't have to put in a whole lot of effort to get that evidence, it's going to happen quite a bit, especially in 4-player where you're churning through that encounter deck so much, and so yeah, getting say +6 on a test, especially if you're not if you're an off-class seeker, is pretty appealing.
Yeah.
And being able to grab multiple coups is good as well. So
yeah, I noticed how the microscope, it doesn't. There's no limit on the number of evidence you can put on it, which is kind of neat.
we are going to wrap up this batch of reviews with the mouse mask, the Meek Watcher. This is a 1-cost asset with a willpower and intellect skill icon, item, charm, and mask trait. Limit 1 mask per investigator. Uses 2 offerings. Replenish one of these offerings after you reveal a location or put a new location into play. As a free triggered ability, you can spend 1 offering. You get +2 willpower or +2 intellect for this skill test. Limit once per test, and it does not require a slot. I'm honestly surprised they put that replenishment text on there, because I mean, you just play the game and you're going to replenish this thing. I'm getting offerings to spend on tests, 2 of the most important tests in the game.
Yeah, it's the higher education combo.
I'm here to kind of be the dissenting opinion, because my experience has been that getting this replenishment is really difficult. The 3-player campaign I've been in has seen Kohaku and Sister Mary consistently running ahead of Kate and having a lot of difficulty getting this thing recharged. Now, partially that's on me, but I think if you're not playing Ursula or Monterey Jack, and Monterey Jack can also take the Fox mask, which doesn't take up a restricted slots, even though I think the mouse mask thematically and like mechanically fits his vibe a little better. I think oftentimes Seekers might not be the first ones into a new location. And this is I think it's a lot more interesting of a card to evaluate in multiplayer, because as you say, in solo this is just basically free. Before I go any further, I have to give a huge shout out to a friend of mine, William, Will I Am on Instagram, who previewed this card. We're close friends, and he got to preview this card, so it's always fun to see. And he did a great preview. I want to say his mother actually carved a real mouse mask, and he put pictures of that on his Instagram. So if you haven't seen those, then definitely go look those up. It's really cool. He's Will I Am on Instagram, I believe. So should be able to find him.
Will I Game?
Oh, Will I Am Games. That's the one. Yes. Sorry.
Okay, I was about to say, you're friends with Will I Am, dude.
No, sorry, I don't use
friends with
Instagram.
I was gonna say, you're friends with Will I Am. Can I come over to your house and like hang out with Will I Am? I got some questions to ask him.
Yeah, it's I think it's also kind of funny you say, or kind of funny. I think it's kind of interesting. I was personally hoping this would be intellect and agility. I find agility to be a very underrated stat. I love evading as Seekers.
That's the rogue combo though. So.
Yeah, it's the rogue combo. That's ended up on the better faction anyway. But yeah, I think this is it's a powerful effect. The trouble that I have with it is how good is a +2 intellect bonus in Seeker actually? Because you have magnifying glass and you have 5 intellect. So I actually think that this card is deceptively not as powerful as you think it is, because it's in the faction where the other tools to get the same result are actually just better. It's good for willpower treachery protection, but it's not the only tool to do that. And annoyingly, I think that the investigator this is best for is Amanda. And Amanda didn't need more help. But the reason is that she's the only one who consistently can use more intellect boosts to be more powerful, because she starts with an intellect of 2. And she might be using a skill card. Yeah, she has a skill card that gives her a small skill boost and a very powerful effect, or a big skill boost but no powerful effect. If you put a deduction under Amanda and then use Mouse Mask to make up for your intellect, then you're breaking the game probably. That's Amanda's.
Oh, that's what Amanda does.
Yeah, that's Amanda do what Amanda do. But I think I'm actually a lot lower on this mask, particularly than all the other masks, and I don't think it's because this is a bad card, but I think that compared to all the other classes, Seeker needs it the least. And I don't know. I'm just I haven't been terribly impressed with this card. I've played Force Learning in Kate, and I've tossed this out more than once just because it's I can take an action to play this, and then I get some intellect bonuses.
Force Learning, my gal. Oh.
Not what we need right now. Yeah,
Force Learning.
That's maybe the other problem. My deck is 50 cards right now because it's Force Learning and Ancestral Knowledge and all the other shenanigans going on. If you don't drop in the game, then this is a lot worse, because the longer the game goes on, the worse this effect gets.
Well, let me tell you something about Force Learning, because I can tell you which investigator this is actually most good for. It's Lola Hayes. And here's why. Because replenishing doesn't require her to be in Seeker.
You bring up a good point.
Yeah. So what that means is that, and I've played Lola over the years, and I found that when you go to make your big when you want to go and make your big investigate test anyway, you're going to swap into Seeker, and then you spend the charges on those turns when you need to do investigates. And then you go and you play the game, and then it refills itself. In fact, one thing I'll say is that I've been getting to play a bunch of True Solo lately, and one thing I've noticed, because I used to hate True Solo, is that the masks have made True Solo like much more, like significantly like more palatable, because you just pay one resource, you put this thing down, and you have a way to deal with tough tests. Whereas in True Solo, you're like, I feel like I'm constantly having to like spend resources just to like get from turn to turn. But now I have this like reservoir of extra bonuses for important tests. Also, one thing, and this brings up what you were saying about forced learning. I also see this as like magnifying glass number 3. So if you were already running 2 magnifying glasses, this is like your third copy, because it's slotless. You could just put it out there without like overwriting your hand slots, which is also nice. So like coming from my point of view, like the 3-3-3-3 life, I kind of love this thing. This has made like Solo, this mouse mask in particular has made Solo like much easier to do.
How are we rating this?
I'm going to give this thing an Elder Sign. I was just thinking about how I'm looking forward to playing this in Roland, and I've toyed with this in the Dunwich Investigators as well, in fact, because they can take any of the masks, so trying to figure out which mask is the best mask for any given Dunwich Investigator is a nice choice to have. Yeah, and it's so easy to replenish in Solo that I think I was looking at one scenario, and I think there were 6 replenishments, and I think that's probably pretty standard for most scenarios. So you should have plenty of offerings to spend. How about you?
I am putting this at Elder thing. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's not that bad. No, I'm not joining you with Elder Sign. I'm putting this in a +1. I don't think this is as important for Seekers, and I also think that with the limit was 1 mask per Investigator and Seekers' tendency to draw through their deck maybe more than once in a scenario, you maybe don't want to play 2. Because I believe with how the limits work, you can't actually overplay this if it's empty. I could be wrong about that. Please correct me in the comments if that's wrong.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Unlike slots where you can like play a new one and discard the existing card with limits, I don't quite remember how that works. But the long answer is the short answer is I don't necessarily think that this card is nearly as impactful for the Seeker as a faction compared to something like the Wolf Mask, which single-handedly made Sister Mary into a really competent combatter. This is it lets you investigate a little better, and it gives you a lot of uses, admittedly. It's not a bad card, but I think I'm happy putting this in +1. I look forward to everybody in the comments calling me bad because I didn't put this in Elder Sign.
I understand why. Because you don't necessarily need it. You're already blowing through the active part, the intellect test, and it's not like the Wolf Mask where you doing your thing replenishes it. Yeah, I see what's going on there. I see all of your points. Now, I'm giving this thing an elder sign because this is let me play True Solo and let me enjoy it. So and then also I have this thought in my head that even if I'm playing even if I ever were to lower myself to playing a Seeker ever again in multiplayer, which it's not happening. But if I ever did, I would consider this as the third magnifying glass, and then it would go in there as well. So yeah, Elder Sign, pretty good, very strong.
One final thought on this card. Maybe one of the reasons why I'm rating it a little lower is I have, of course, been playing it in Kate, who already has an inbuilt way to get +2 on her skill test. So maybe that's also why it's been feeling a little excessive, is I already have this literal effect printed on my Investigator card. That's not changing my rating. I'm happy with a +1.
That's going to do it for our look at the first batch of Seeker cards in the Feast for Hemlock Vale Investigator expansion. Let us know in the comments down below what you think. Have you had a chance to play any of these cards? What has your experience been? Any final thoughts on this batch of cards?
I really love these cards. I really love the science theme. Well, it feels kind of weird because science as a theme is actually not at all consistent with one another. You put Microscope and the chemistry set next to each other, and you're these 2 cards do not go in the same deck, other than the fact that they maybe go in Kate for her ability. But I really like Seekers not just getting better at things, but instead getting different ways of doing the things that they're supposed to be good at. So yes, FFG, more like this, please. The next, I don't want to spoil too much, but I know the cards we're going to be talking about in the next video, and already looking forward to it.